This morning it's my pleasure to introduce our speaker, and this is our speaker who couldn't show up back in October when the federal government was shut down. And I asked Dan Eddy, who is our the Siuslaw National Forest Assistant Fire Staff Officer, if he could come and share with us sort of the results of last summer's fire season, which I think we all heard quite a bit about. And Dan said he would get up early in the morning, and I really didn't listen to too much when he complained about that, because when you're on a fire assignment for 2 or 3 weeks at a time, you're easily up and ready to go at 6 a.m. So if you would help me welcome Dan Eddy.
Well, thank you for the invite here, and I'm going to go pretty low tech here today. So, as Jenny said, my name is Dan Eddy. I'm the Assistant Fire Staff or Zone Fire Management Officer for the Siuslaw National Forest. Just kind of a quick rundown of how we service as a fire management organization in this area. We're combined with the Salem District BLM in a service-first organization. So the fire staff is a BLM employee, and so and then I'm a Forest Service employee, and we have fire crews that are employed by the Forest Service, and then some fuels folks that work for both agencies. What that allows us to do is stretch your tax dollars just a little bit further. Especially on the west side of Oregon, where we have less fires than other places, but we still have the same requirements for management and having fire crews available for the national good. As Jenny said, we heard a lot about fire season this last year. It was on the news quite a bit. The numbers don't really play out the same way. Nationally, we were down in our average number of fires, and we were actually down on our acres burned. In 2013, we had just over 45,000 fires for 4 million, just over 4 million acres burned. As compared to 2012, we had 56,000 fires, and we burned a little over 9 million acres. In the last 10 years, the big year was 2006, where we had 91,000 fires, and we burned 9.5 million acres. That kind of brings our 10-year average out to 69,000 fires for 6,800,000 fires. So last year, nationally, our numbers were down, our acres were down. If you go back to 2012, one of the reasons why we had the larger numbers of acres burned was, folks might remember the Long Draw fire, some of the fires in southeastern Oregon. They were all out in BLM, sage and grassland over there. We burned almost 1 million acres in BLM ground last year, which was the first time in history that anybody can kind of remember that the BLM burned more acres than the Forest Service.
We had competition.
Yeah. So in the spring, we do and throughout the fire season, we do outlooks, and our predictive services guys, the meteorologists, the fire behavior folks, they look at the weather and what's going on, and they look at the nation, and they kind of give us an idea of what's going to happen for the next month for fire severity. So you can see on this chart, the southwest or the southeast was very moist. In 2013, the southeast never really got the fire season going. Usually they start burning in January and February, and then the fires kind of sweep across the south into the southwest, and then they move up into the northwest and the Rockies. So this is for May. So they're predicting a little bit, this hashtag here is a little increasing fire behavior. This area down in here for May should be red. That's where fire season is usually going, down in that area. So it was starting to increase, creeping up into California a little bit, and that's south central Oregon. So then in July, it's kind of moved up. You can see the red starting to move up into Oregon, covering the areas where you would think in July, or this is actually June. So the areas where you would think, the east side of the state, central Oregon, moving up into central Washington. So then July came around, the predictions for July. And you can see the state of Oregon is pretty much in a high fire severity area. This is what the prediction for July was. We don't see this, especially when it covers the west side of Oregon. This made us very nervous. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of the local stuff when I'm going to kind of tear it down nationally to Oregon, Washington, and some of the local stuff. So we'll see how that plays through. So one of the things that brought the national fire effort into the news was an incident down in Arizona, the Yarnell fire, on June 30th of this year. 19 members of the Granite Mountain Hotshot crew perished on that day on a fire there. This kind of set the scene for the summer. Unfortunately, we got the privilege to be able to honor one of our more local firefighters, John Corson Jr. out of the Westland area. He was on that hotshot crew. Several members of my organization and I went to his memorial service that they had here in Oregon. Overall, nationally, we had 34 firefighter fatalities this year. 4 of those were in Oregon. I'll talk a little bit more about some of those when we get there. The only other year that we've had that many firefighter fatalities was 1994 when the Prineville Hotshot crew perished on Storm King Mountain. That was the Yarnell fire. The South Canyon fire was the largest number of firefighters at one time. As you go back to the 1933 Griffin Peak fire, where there were 129 firefighters that were killed. It was a CCC crew out of Los Angeles. Last year, we burned less than 2,000 structures. That was a good year over average. Most of that, really, the way I look at it was we really didn't get a late season fire in California. The Santa Ana's, the fires out of Los Angeles that burned a lot of structures in a short period of time. The one other fire of major significance in the nation was the Rim Fire, which was outside of Yosemite National Park. That started August 17th, burned 257,000 acres, destroyed 11 homes, burnt 98 outbuildings and 3 commercial buildings. That one was in the news quite a bit. Everybody was seeing that. So, bringing it back in scope to Oregon, Washington, which is our region. We had just shy of 3,000 fires for about 352,000 acres. The 10-year average is about 3,900 fires and about 400,000 acres. So really we weren't significant. It wasn't huge. And if you talk to a lot of firefighters, other than the fatalities this year, it wasn't that big of a season. We had 7 lightning storms that came through our area this year, with 7 storms that had over 12,000 lightning strikes in each event. This graph here kind of shows lightning strikes over the 10-year average. So this year we had a significant, almost 25,000 lightning strikes in Oregon and Washington during our fire season. The thing that happened with that, though, is most of those came from moisture this year. They had a moisture, they didn't have a big dry period before them, they came from moisture rolled in, right? In Oregon, the southwest Oregon and western Oregon, you saw how we were kind of showing that dry period in May of this year. We had that period of east winds. I don't know if you guys remember that. It was really nice, really warm. Down in southwest Oregon, they had a couple of fires that went to 200-300 acres in May. Here locally, we had a 35-acre and a 15-acre fire. 35-acre burned through fresh fell and buck timber out of the LC area. Burned onto BLM for about 3 acres there. Those aren't the type of fires we have in May. Really had us concerned, especially when they start showing these predictions of a hot, dry summer. On July 26th, an unpredicted lightning storm rolled through southwestern Oregon. The storm had 2,500 strikes. There were several hundred fires caused by that storm, and 98% of them were caught with the initial attack. Some of the fires that came out of it mostly were on BLM and private ground. The Big Windy Fire, 27,000 acres. The Labrador Fire, which was on Forest Service ground, was only 2,000 acres. The Douglas Complex, you might have heard of that, went to 48,000 acres. And the Whiskey Complex on the Tiller Ranger District went to 18,000 acres. In Western Oregon, we have a unique system for the protection of BLM grounds. They're contracted to the state of Oregon. The Oregon Department of Forestry does fire suppression on BLM lands because it's at O&C grounds where it's a patchwork, a section here, a section there. So it's really hard for the BLM to do their own suppression on there. So they have a contract with ODF. As part of that, with a lot of that land being on BLM and private grounds, the Oregon Department of Forestry is responsible for the suppression on that. The large fire costs in Oregon were over $122 million for the state of Oregon. They had 1,139 fires that burned 103,000 acres. That's the largest fire season the state of Oregon's had since the Tillamook burns. And in one period, it was in one day, or one incident, was more fires than the Tillamook burn, because Tillamook burns over sequential years. I have a handout that the state put out. I'm going to hand this out to you guys. You guys can look at it. It talks about how the storm came through and a few of those. It's there. With those fires, with everything that's going on in Southwest Oregon, everybody else in Oregon pitched in. We sent fire crews down there, folks from Eastern Oregon. There were folks from all over the country in and helping out in Southwest Oregon. Unfortunately, we talked about the number of firefighter fatalities earlier. We had 4 fatalities in the state of Oregon for firefighters. A contract faller died on a fire outside of Sisters. He just came in to size up a tree, the tree gave way, and before he even put a saw to the tree, and he was trapped underneath it and perished. On the Big Windy Fire down in southwest Oregon, local gentleman from Albany, Jesse Trader, died when his water tender that he was driving rolled over on top of him. That was the second memorial service that I went to this year. And that was towards the end of June. It wasn't really setting the season up the way we'd like. Over in Vail, towards the end of August, the Grassy Mountain Fire, a lowboy operator died of medical issues in the vehicle he was sitting in. And on the Nabob Fire down in southwest Oregon, on the Siskiyou National Forest, a gentleman died of a medical issue there too. So those were the 4 fatalities in Oregon. We're in the process of reviews and investigations on all those, including the Yarnell Fire. The fire services, we call ourselves a learning culture, so we like to get an investigation or a process. We have a process called Lessons Learned, where we go in and review the incident, and then we try and learn from that, so we can put those slides in our minds, and so if that situation happens to us, or we start seeing that, then we raise the trigger in the back of our minds. With the large fires in southwest Oregon, Big Windy Complex was one of the largest ones. From July 26th to August 22nd, the state of Oregon spent almost $25 million in suppression there. It's kind of an interesting chart. So we've never really seen this before. This is how the state of Oregon, and we use a lot of contract resources in federal firefighting and the state firefighting. We have contract kitchens that come in to feed our firefighters. There's a lot of money being spent in fire suppression. This blue shows you out of that $24 million, $16 million went back to in-state resources. So a lot of that money came right back into the state. Not really the way you want money to go to this back into the state, but a lot of it's coming back into us. Out-of-state overhead crews, there's $4 million. We had a lot of fires going on. We had to bring folks in from all over the country. Out-of-state aviation, $1 million. That kind of surprised me. Aviation is very expensive, so we must have a lot of in-state aviation resources that we use. And then about $2 million went to out-of-state, just miscellaneous, that they didn't really account for. So that kind of shows, you know, we spent a lot of the taxpayers' money in Oregon, $122 million of state suppression funds. You know, a lot of it came right back into the economy. So then, taking from large fires in southwest Oregon, drop down to our local area, the Sileslaw National Forest, the Salem District BLM. On the Forest Service, we had 10 fires for about 3 acres. Most of our fires are man-caused fires. Most of them in the recreation areas of the Oregon Dunes National Recreation Area. Folks will light a log on fire and walk off and leave it. We had one lightning fire that was in the Corvallis watershed. Our land management plan says that we'll suppress all fires. It was in the watershed. It was a no-brainer. We went in and we put that fire out. BLM, Salem District had 9 fires, ended up being for 0 acres. So that's, you know, a campfire or something like that. We don't end up. West Oregon District for Oregon Department of Forestry, which is out of Paloma, we had about 15 fires. I'm not sure the exact number. And some of those included those early season fires. And as Joni said earlier, we had the furlough at the end of October. That's normally when we are still in fire season, the east wind period. One of the things that helped us out a lot was we had that patch of rain right there at the end of September, and we got several inches in a couple of days there, and it just knocked us out of fire season. It's the same rainstorm that went into Southern California, so it just stopped it, which was really good for us since we had to send everybody home. And then just our local resources, all the way from my fire crews to folks that work for Joni on the public affairs shop, even Joni at points, we all pitch into the greater good. We sent 3 crews out. I don't remember what the number. We have 50 red carded firefighters that come out of our dispatch center. Lots of incident management team folks that went out and supported either here locally or in other states as the season went on. So, with that, I can open up for questions.
Now that chart you presented on how much money was spent, how much money comes into the state from our firefighters going outside to Northern California or Montana? And I'm thinking specifically on the aviation thing, and we have Evergreen Aviation up there. Do they participate and bring in quite a bit on?
Evergreen does a little bit. They've sold off a lot of their firefighting aircraft to other companies, but Erickson, Helicopter Express, there are a lot of companies in Oregon that have aviation resources, and so and that support nationally. I don't have those numbers, but I would imagine that in the state of Oregon, it's probably quite a bit of money that comes back.
It comes back from fighting elsewhere.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good question about lightning strikes. How do you determine how many there are?
We actually have a lightning detection system that I'm not sure all the science voodoo that's behind it, but it'll let you know when lightning strikes the ground. It's an electrical charge. We can actually bring up maps. We do that during fire season when a storm comes through, and very accurate. It'll give us a GPS location, and a lot of times we can go out and find the actual tree that got hit by lightning.
So by your statistics here, even on a 10-year average, looks like people cause more fires than God.
Geez, probably there.
And that's really this form here is set out by the state of Oregon in the larger scheme. When you include the federal lands and stuff like that, lightning actually causes more fires.
So with some of the logging controversy and places with stopping logging in a lot of areas, are those getting more prone to big fires?
Land management practices have changed how fires burn in a lot of areas where we've had fire exclusion and we haven't done any management in there. The fires will burn hotter, more intense. You still have to have the start, so either the lightning or the man cause.
Okay, I'm gonna stop the question. And as a thank you gift for getting up. It was a great presentation. We have a coffee mug.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, do we have a drawing?